Today, I want to talk with you about 5 very dangerous myths and misconceptions about eating disorders. My name is Sheena. I'm a registered dietitian and eating disorder survivor. So, misconception number 1, eating disorders are a choice. If I just could shake anybody that believes that we can will our way out of an eating disorder, that would be the day. Eating disorders are a complex mental health disorder that is a combination of genetic factors, social factors, and behavioral aspects that we cannot simply will away. The belief that an eating disorder is a choice often gives people with an eating disorders the false misconceptions that if they try hard enough, they can will away this eating disorder. And this is incredibly dangerous because this is actually the exact type of thinking that got these individuals into their eating disorder in the first place. And that is that we have the ultimate control over food, our bodies, and the way that we think and behave around food. So, no, eating disorders are not a choice. Let's scratch that from the list. Number 2, you have to be skinny in order to have an eating disorder. Another very dangerous misconception about eating disorders. In fact, most people that have an eating disorder, including bulimia nervosa, anorexia nervosa, ARFID, and binge eating disorder, and other types of eating disorders, these individuals most likely do not live in a thin body. In fact, only about 6% of individuals with a life-threatening eating disorder live in a small or an emaciated body. Many individuals do not lose weight when they have an eating disorder. Unfortunately, this myth and misconception about eating disorders often causes people to have hindered treatment programs with their eating disorder, so they may not be able to access care due to insurance not seeing it as a necessity. Or, unfortunately, the treatment centers themselves may not see it as a necessity if they don't meet this stereotypical emaciated look of an eating disorder, which is not the norm at all. So just a lot of education needs to be had around this topic. Misconception number 3: if you are in a larger body, your eating disorder is less severe. all of these are just so damaging and derail the possibility for long and lasting recoveries, unfortunately, for so many. If, in fact, many people in larger bodies experience more intense eating disorder behaviors and more severe symptoms of their eating disorder. And this is often because these individuals lose a greater amount of weight, which it causes greater stress on their bodies because they were living in a larger body to begin with. Many times their eating disorders are praised or even recommended by healthcare providers, which puts them at great risk of debilitating symptoms from their eating disorder. Misconception number 4: you can't go from one eating disorder to another. I think I'm just going to say that every time. Okay, so many individuals will experience more than one eating disorder in their lifetime if they are a person that has experienced an eating disorder. And the reason why is most of these eating disorders that we're experiencing are a form of a restrictive eating disorder. So this includes everything from anorexia nervosa to bulimia nervosa to binge eating disorder and other types of eating disorders unspecified. So when we experience something like anorexia nervosa, our body is trying to retaliate and help us to keep weight on by doing things like slowing the metabolism, brain changes that encourage us to eat, et cetera, et cetera. And so oftentimes when we see something like anorexia nervosa, when we are in that full-fledged recovery, we may experience something like binge eating disorder, bulimia nervosa, or some other type of eating disorder. that coincides with that. And the reason why is because these things are all restrictive, but our body is trying to kind of retaliate against that intentional restriction that we're having. And the same holds true for things like binge eating disorder, where we're often binge eating and then restricting, and then perhaps we might transition to a full-fledged restriction and experiencing something like anorexia nervosa. So switching between one eating disorder and another eating disorder is actually very, very, very common. I actually don't know many individuals that haven't had this experience. So it is very common in eating disorders and eating disorder recovery. Misconception number 5. If you wanted to, you could just eat. No, you cannot. If you are an individual with an eating disorder, it is actually sometimes very dangerous for you to just eat. Without the help of a healthcare team specializing in eating disorders, it may be dangerous or even life-threatening for you to just resume calorie consumption on your own. Something called refeeding syndrome can really kind of get in there, and it can cause a lot of detriment or even death. And so you really do need the care of a qualified healthcare team in order to even safely renourish. Aside from that, we cannot simply just eat if we want to, if we are an individual struggling with an eating disorder. Why? It goes back to the fact that those eating disorders are not a choice. They are a combination of genetics, social contributors, family upbringing, our environment, all of these variables that we need to pay special mind to individually as we're working towards that eating disorder recovery. So these are just a few of the common myths and misconceptions around eating disorders that can be detrimental to individuals experiencing disordered eating or full-blown eating disorders.